And good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mariners fans. It's only been like barely 10 hours since I did a show, but I'm just going to say what a crazy 10 hours it has been for me. But before I even explain, Steve, how you doing?
Oh, dude, I'm excellent, man. And thank you again for having me on. It's always fun to do these with you, man. But yeah, no, I can't complain, man. Everything is just absolutely fantastic here in the fighting town of Flint, Michigan. The personification of American grit. You got to love it, man.
Motor City, baby.
Oh. Well, it's not exactly the Motor City, but we're a good hour outside of the Motor City, but we are in Vehicle City, USA, so close enough.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe I'll visit there someday and watch the Mariners-Tigers game, and you'll be there. But
I'll be in Comerica in August when the Mariners roll through. Trust me. Every year that the Mariners roll through Detroit, there's the only Mariner fan in Michigan that's planting his flag at Comerica Park. God damn it.
Do it so you can get on RoofTop Sports. And I say,
I don't do it for that.
Must I say what a 10 hours it has been for me. Like first it was more like 24 hours. I had 5-house tour with my clients. Then my friend had to cancel his plans because we were going to go out and play some poker, which was okay anyway, because I ended up doing
here's where your night comes in. Right after not going to the poker, this is where your night comes in.
Then at the last second, because I was kind of like, dang it, I wanted to play poker and kick his butt or have my butt kicked and just have the laughs. I ended up doing a reaction video of the Kingdom finale, which I should have done on June 27th, 2024, because that would have been the 25th anniversary of 99. So what was I thinking?
Here's the thing. Also, you forgot to leave out that you binge watch Cobra Kai.
That was right after I finished the show, and I noticed.
I know that you wanted me to jump on last night, but when you asked me, it was already 11:30, and I was like,
yeah.
"There's no fucking way I'm getting out of bed."
No way.
But now here's the thing: if you want to do a live reaction to something, we should do Game 5 of the divisional series. I think that would be pretty cool. Or maybe classic Mariner playoff victories. I think that would be pretty cool.
That's already in the plans. And for 95, I'm looking to wait until next year because that would be the 30th anniversary. So I think the demand will be a little bit better.
Perhaps. I think, when it comes to views, I think that any classic playoff victory would be excellent. But before we get into it, I got to ask you a question. I want you to know if you agree on this, okay? So I keep hearing, and you and I have somewhat agreed on this, that in the year 2000, that was the best year for the Mariners to win a championship. And the thing is, it's like yes and no. Yes, in the extent that I think that our lineup and our bullpen and our starting rotation was good enough to get there. But the one thing that the Mariners did not have that the Yankees had was playoff pedigree and also the ability to close out games in the playoffs. Because if you remember, we go to the playoffs in 95, and then 2 years, we don't get back to the playoffs for another 2 years in 97. And then it was 3 more years until we get to the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Yankees were in the playoffs in 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and they won 3 rings. So not only do they have the playoff pedigree with basically the core of that roster continuously in the playoffs, but they also knew how to close out big playoff games, which was something that we just did not have. Now, granted, we did have guys that had won championships, Ricky Henderson, John Allrood. We had guys who had been to the top of the mountains before, but specifically with that group of players and the way that roster was constructed, we had yet to really get into the playoffs. Yes, we swept Chicago, but it's Chicago, dude. You know what I mean? Like, we are massively better than Chicago. But when it comes to getting past a big-ass hurdle like the Yankees, we just didn't have the playoff experience to know how to close games in big game situations. I'm curious if you agree.
2000, I think, should have been the year the Mariners should have went to the World Series, and I'm pretty confident they would have beaten up Mike Piazza and Al Leiter's Mets. But
sure.
They just couldn't get through the Yankees was the biggest problem. And what was missing was when they were losing their superstars, Randy Johnson and Ken Griffey Jr., it actually did start showing in the playoffs. And I think 2001 was when it showed most, when losing superstars. And had they kept at least one of them, maybe things could have been a bit different.
I just think that playoff experience, it's not talked a lot. And what's funny is I was watching a interview with Derek Jeter, who is obviously a consummate champion, but he was saying that there's a lot that goes into winning a championship. And if a team has been together for a few years and has experienced those highs, and having that experience of knowing how to close out pivotal playoff games, it goes a long way. On top of just having talent, like there's no doubt that the Mariners were talented in 2000. It's just, in order to get past those Yankees, you had to have that know-how of doing it in the postseason. And I just don't think that the 2000 Mariners had that ability to close out those big games. And we know that because in every opportunity the Mariners had in the playoffs, in 95 against the Indians, couldn't close them out. In 97 against the Orioles, couldn't close them out. Couldn't close them out in back-to-back years against the Yankees in the LCS. And then we saw it in 2022 when they finally get back to the playoffs against Houston in game.
Close it out.
That pivotal game one where we actually had a lead in that game and we couldn't close it out.
Yep, and hopefully they can absolutely figure that out. And we shall transition to what this show is going to be about. Yeah, we're gonna briefly talk about the first half, and we're gonna try not to go too much into it because so much has happened and been said, like ever since the All-Star break. Then we're gonna go to briefly about the draft and why you think it may have been a good draft class, and then we're gonna talk about Jerry Dipoto not maybe wanting to make a deal for the trade deadline. We'll see about that. And then Alex Rodriguez actually joined in 710 or Seattle Sports Radio with Brock and Salk, and actual kudos to them. Now, I don't always agree with what they believe in, but I do give them props and credit for getting Alex Rodriguez into a show because it sounds like it would have been against the Mariners' agenda to even allow that to happen.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't buy it. I'm not putting, and again, this is, it's one of those things where I don't put stock in anything that sways me emotionally one way or another. Just like fans were falling off a cliff in the first half when the Mariners went into that slide, going into the All-Star break. I wasn't screaming that the sky was falling because I understand that this team is really a second half team to begin with. And so when it came to Jerry Dipoto in his comments, it's like, I don't put too much stock into it because his competitors are also vying for the same players. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure that Jerry Dipoto wants to keep his cards incredibly close to the vest.
I would probably lose a game of poker to him. And before we get into the briefly first half, I have a softball highlight to show you, and it's actually a good one this time. It's not like one of those goofy failed ones where people are making fun of me about, but maybe this one you might like, and then we'll get into that first half. Here we go.
Yeah. Nice job.
My falling double play.
Look at the athleticism followed up by a Lily jump into the air. You know what I mean? It's I'll say this, man. That was that was a good double play, man. I'll give you your flowers for that double play.
I'll take it. I'll take the flowers because if it was a participation type trophy, I would have thrown it if it was a play much more simple than that. Now we go into the first half. Mariners have a 1-game lead in the division. They had a 10-game lead, and they completely just, unfortunately, lost pretty much all of it. But first half has been very up and down. It's fortunate that the Mariners are in this position, and we'll talk about the strengths of this team so far, like what went well and then what went terribly. And I'll actually give you the lead on this one. What did you like about the first half of the Mariners?
I like the fact that the Mariners, even in the midst of adversity, they were able to bank a 10-game lead in this division. I think it goes to show the strengths of what this team is, which is pitching. But that being said, even with a a terrible offense, and make no mistake, it's not a good offense. I think we can all look at this and say that it's very, very, very incomplete. That's the nice way of saying it. But they were still able to piece enough to bank a 10-game lead, and they were able to take advantage of the slow starts of Houston and take advantage of the slow starts of Texas. Those two teams were battling injuries, and they were still able to handle their business. They were able to rebound from a bad start. They lost 4 of 8 in their first 12 and were able to rebound. They had a terrible road trip to the East Coast through Baltimore, New York, and Washington, and they were still able to rebound after that. Came home and rebounded. And then, of course, they go back on an East Coast swing that started a slide, but they rebounded a little bit. And at one point leading into the Angels series, they had won 4 of 6. And were they playing great? By no means, but they rebounded a little bit. And then, of course, going into the All-Star break, I think you and I were both saying that they needed at least 3 or 4, if not a sweep of the Angels. It was right there, gaining some momentum into the All-Star break. It didn't happen. Oh, well. But that being said, good teams know how to do that. And that's why, and again, I didn't get too high and I didn't get too low. If you've been around this game for more than a year, and I've been around this game for 30 plus years, in and around this game, you just understand that baseball is a game of momentum. It's also a game of swings where you're going to have streaks of very good baseball, and then you're going to have streaks where it's not. It's like the stock exchange, man. It flows. And the one thing that I will say that even in the midst of a dive, they're still getting very good starting pitching. As a matter of fact, one of our starters was named to the All-Star game. So that kind of, it goes to show you just exactly that, the pedigree of what the Mariners have when it comes to starting pitching. But for the most part, the season starts now. Granted, yes, the Houston Astros have caught up, but by no means that is this thing over. And I think what plays to the Mariners' strength is they have a history of being able to get hot in the second half and carry that momentum into September. Last year it didn't work out, but the 2 Septembers prior definitely worked out. So, and I also like the Mariners' schedule in September this year as opposed to last year. They don't play the Dodgers in mid-September where you're going to lose momentum. But I'll just say this, that I didn't think it was as bad as Mariner fans would want to make it out to be. And I definitely think that with an offense that's held together with duct tape and glue, scotch tape and glue, they were able to bank a 10-game lead at one point, and it just shows it does show the grit and the fight that this team actually does have.
A lot of the comments I would totally agree with you. Like, we like what the starting pitching has done. We do like the passion of this team. Although I would have appreciated like some of the hustle from like the likes of the Julio Rodriguez. Sure. Like, starting pitching has been second to none, even with Brian Wu being not exactly 100%.
Same thing with Bryce Miller.
Bryce Miller is very erratic, and Luis Castillo may have lost his edge to be a number 1 starter, but George Kirby and Logan Gilbert have held it together, which is why Logan Gilbert did everything he did to deserve that all-star spot. And he really should have pitched more than 87 pitches in that first half finale against the Angels. And I would have, at that point, I would have been fine. We'll take the split, which I was predicting, by the way. I was predicting a split, and everyone else is like, 3 of 4, a sweep. It's just the Angels. They don't have Mike Trout. And I'm like, yes, but the Mariners do these that one small mistake they made, it can destroy an entire series, which it did.
Yeah. Well, the Mariners do have a tendency to play down to their opponents on the road. This is a team that, it's weird because they, offensively they play worse at home, but when it comes to pitching, they're very good at home. There seems to be some sort of disconnection in form away from T-Mobile Park when it comes to pitching. And because of it, they tend to play down to inferior opponents that they should absolutely sweep. And the reason why I was saying 3 of 4 going into that Angel series was because, top to bottom, the Mariners are just a better team. But I'll say this: the reason why the Mariners have their issues is because, number one, they don't utilize their speed, they don't put the game in motion, they don't have timely hitting, and you can have all the pitching in the world, but when you look back at some of the best Mariner teams, the one thing that they always had was the ability to have timely hits with runners in scoring position, right? And it wasn't necessarily a 3-run home run. It could have been just a base hit up the box, you know what I mean? Or, a nice little liner into right field or left field that would be able to pick up a run. And you're able to piece together 1-run innings before you can get to the 3-run inning. And that's something that this team just does not elude. The biggest reason why, and we're going to dive into it a little bit later, is their ability to hit with 2 strikes. This is one of the worst two strike hitting teams I've ever seen. And it's because, this weird concept that the Mariners are okay with strikeouts as long as, their core players are able to have a big inning here and there. And it's like, that's completely ass backwards.
It definitely is. And what drives me nuts, absolutely nuts, and this is going to be the last part of the first half because we got to save time for basically everything else, is just the way they swing. Like, there are times where the ball is clearly hitting the dirt, and yes, granted, it's a 90-something mile an hour fastball. It's faster. Like, if I played there, I probably would do the same thing, but these guys are professionals, and when we're seeing balls hit the dirt and they're still hacking at it, like we see Cal Raleigh doing it, we're seeing Julio do it. He looks like he's trying to murder the ball every time. And deep down, I'm like, Julio, chill. You got a guy at third base with like 1 out. You could even lay down a bunt and we'll still be okay. Like, it doesn't have to be a home run. It doesn't even have to be extra bases. Just do a nice little slap or just bunt and you're good. And there are several times where the Mariners should be bunting, especially with 1 out with not even a force out situation. And they still won't do it. And what does it lead to? More strikeouts. And I think it's not only the lack of discipline. Yes.
My question to you is who outside of what's his ass, Luke Raley, can drop down a bunt on this team? Who can do it?
I really think Julio,
but
he has
more also
the skill to do it.
But more else, the bigger question is who's willing to do it? Who's willing to sacrifice for the next guy in the order, which I agree with you. It's a very pivotal part of this game. And if you have faith in the collective, it takes pressure off of everyone. But it's not just who can bunt, but who's willing to. And
only Luke Raley. And he's been the hustler of the team. And he is probably going to be, it's hard to say it. I think he's been actually the most efficient offensive player. Like, most fans are going to say, oh, Cal Raleigh, because he has 20-something home runs. But Luke Raley, when it comes to situations, he will lay down that bunt. And the guy hustles. And for a big dude, he's actually pretty fast.
Yeah. I like Luke Raley, and I like the one thing that I like about Luke Raley outside of his game is I like his mindset, because that dude just wants to get on base. Right there, you have to have guys in your lineup that will get on base regardless, or will try his best to get on base. And that's the right mentality to have. I think a lot of guys, and I think JP is one of those guys too, where the idea is just to get on base. And I think we have a lot of guys in this lineup who think that this team can't win unless I do something spectacular. And I got to be honest with you, man, that's the wrong mindset to have. But that being said, this is chaos ball, and it's been chaos ball since 2021. But at least you can say at least the 2021 team and maybe a little bit of the 2022 team had faith in the collective. And since then, I just think that this group has gotten away from the collective, and it's now just, we're not going to win unless I do blank, like Julio Rodriguez. And it's like, dude, you don't have to swing hard to try to justify your contract. You can literally just put bat to ball and everything will be okay.
Yeah, even if he doesn't hit 20 home runs, but if he's doing like everything else and the Mariners are making playoffs, yes, do the little things. And that's the old saying, do all the little things and the rest will follow. Like, there's a reason why you don't force things. And that's exactly what the Mariners are doing, is they're trying to just force it to make it happen, which is why they make those really insane hacks when they really don't have to. Like, if only JP Crawford could even play like a 10th of his 2023 self, Mariners would have at least maybe a 2-game lead on the division, or maybe 3-game lead. I mean, that's not much, but hey, it's the little things that matter the most. And I think we talked about as much as we could for the first half, and now we're going to transition into Jerry DePoto's comments.
Sure.
I was going to do the draft as number 2, but I think with the flow of this show,
I think we should actually.
Into...
I think we should keep the draft to the end. You know what I mean?
I was thinking draft to the end. Yeah, the draft should be the end because I don't want to break the flow of it. But sure. Jerry DePoto made some comments that got the Mariners fans, and including some of our content creators, with a heavy amount of concerns. And this is what Jerry DePoto said in quote, and you did react to it, and I'll even read that too.
I did.
It was, "We're open to doing something that has the potential to be dynamic. Don't know if that's going to be available. Right now, it's not. And this is as late as we've ever gone into a trade deadline, where I can honestly say it's not." And your initial comment was, "Yes, there is, Jerry. Both Chicago teams are selling, and both have dynamic players that could massively help this team. If you do nothing, you get nothing. You get nothing, you win nothing. You win nothing, you fired." And Couch GM was expressing his concerns that he feels that it sounds like the Mariners aren't going to make big offensive moves at the end of the deadline, and expect the current bats to just perform better. And we can agree that if the Mariners don't make a move, they can forget about the 2024 playoffs, and people are going to be like, "Well, why would you think that? We've got the easiest schedule in baseball, and Mariners have a great starting pitching staff, and bullpen starting to maybe get back into place with Gregory Santos back." But Mariners have got,
and they're going to get Spire back.
They're going to get Spire back, but doesn't mean the Mariners should avoid. There's not saying that they should avoid making those deals, because we don't want another 2002 and 2003 and 2023. We don't want that to happen again.
Right.
So personally, I am absolutely concerned about Jerry's comments, because we're like, 11 days until the trade deadline, and nothing's been happening. And Steve, do you got any additional comments on Jerry? Like, I would feel like we're pretty much on the same page on this one.
There's two things. Number one, I don't put any stock into it, because I do believe that Jerry is also in a position where he does not want to tip his hand at all. Because you have to remember that when you look at the standings, the Houston Astros are right there. And also the Texas Rangers, you have to expect that the Texas Rangers are going to play themselves back into a wild card spot. So you automatically have to assume that both teams are going to make big additions. And I would probably assume, we heard reports that Houston's after Pete Alonso, but you would also have to assume that the Texas Rangers, who also have a deep farm system, are probably going to try to improve their starting rotation if they can, find a buyer for that. So, here's the thing. I would like to think that the Mariners are keeping their cards close to their vest. And if you go back to every deadline, whether it's 2016 all the way through last year, Jerry DePoto does not give up a lot of information. He'll say things like, "Yeah, we're open to making a dynamic move." Of course he is, because since day one, Jerry DePoto has made a lot of dynamic moves. Some worked, some haven't, whatever. So I do expect something to happen, but I like the idea that it's going to be a guy like Luis Robert. Probably not, because that would mean that that Jerry DePoto would have to do something that he's uncomfortable with, which is trade prospects, even big prospects. I think Jerry does overvalue and covet guys like Colt Emerson and Laz Montez. Okay, but they have ammunition in their farm system to be able to pull off any move in baseball. I would like to think it's just finding a good dance partner. The question is what is the asking price that Chicago is putting on for Luis Robert? What are the Cubs putting on Cody Bellinger? Right. So for me, I would like to think that the two, because the Mariners really just need a minimum of 2 bats and also a bullpen arm. I would like to think that those 2 bats are probably going to be a guy like Jazz Chisholm, who can play multiple positions, He can play the outfield and play second base, which the Mariners definitely need an upgrade in both regards. And I would also think like a guy like Michael Conforto, who's a Seattle guy who's been wanting to play for the Mariners pretty much his entire career. He doesn't light the world on fire, but of course he's got a WRC plus over 100. He's a bat that can play multiple corner outfield spots, which definitely raises the ground floor. And to me, I would like to think that those are going to be the type of deals that the Mariners are going to make. But lastly, what I'm going to say is that I think Jerry Dipoto is 100% full of shit. To sit there and say that, no teams are, they're like he hasn't seen a deadline where no teams are, or it's like, come on, Jerry, like it's full of shit. Understand that most of those sellers have the leverage because obviously they have the players that we covet. And so naturally it's going to be pricey. And that's something that you have to do. That's the uncomfortable thing that the Mariners are going to have to do to upgrade this. I think Jerry Dipoto went on to say that, the strikeouts are crazy and that, that's on him, but he wants more contact. It's like, well, yeah, Doug, Jerry. And so in order to get that contact, that's going to mean what? You might have to overpay. You might just have to do it. But in order to finish this thing off, and the Mariners, as far as I'm concerned, they're in the driver's seat in this division. I don't care how many games back Houston is, but they're in the driver's seat. And they have an easy rest of July leading into the deadline. And they have I think when I look at the August schedule, yeah, there's some series in there that are going to be, tough. But for the most part, it's not to say that the Mariners can't pull off 15 wins in the month of August leading into September. That's definitely doable. But in order for the Mariners to finish this off, they absolutely need help. And I will say this. The frustration that Cal Raleigh had last year at the end of the season where he's saying that he sees their division opponents making these big, bold moves, there's something to that. And the frustration lies in the fact that the Mariners are doing their best right now. They are playing hard right now, and the results are what they are. When you go out there at the deadline and you add, not adding by selling, but legitimately just add, it injects momentum, it injects adrenaline into that clubhouse, and it also sends a message to your players that you want to win just as much as they want to win. It's that boost, it's that confidence from the front office to the clubhouse that we're all in this together. And that's the signal that it makes. And I'll say this again, if you do nothing, you get nothing. If you get nothing, you don't win anything. And if you don't win anything, I'm sorry, you're fired. You cannot have another season where you're trading your best reliever away for AAA players. It doesn't work that way. If your mission is to be Mr. 54% and get into the playoffs every single year, which is important, then you have to do things that sometimes it's going to make you uncomfortable. You're going to have to gamble. You can be smart, but you have to gamble. And this is the year where you can't throw away 2024 because you're afraid of trading Cole Young or Ty Pete or Laz Montez or whoever, name the prospect. You're afraid to do it because he might be something 4 years from now. It does not work that way.
And 4 years from now, Cal Raleigh or George Kirby, they may not even be on the team anymore.
Right.
And then we're going to be looking at, in years from now, they're going to be looking at how did the team of Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Cal Raleigh, and Julio Rodriguez not win a World Series? Like, we're going to be repeating history of like what happened in the 90s. And
right. It's the same thing that happened when we had 4 first ballot Hall of Famers playing together in their prime: Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez, Randy Johnson, and A-Rod. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you not at least get to a World Series with the caliber of those type of players on your roster at the same time? I look at this and it's like, dude, this is the best roster as far as pitching goes and as far as core players goes. Like, this is the best roster we've seen since the early 90s as those players were coming through the minor league system and getting to Seattle. Like, it's on par with that. And we all remember what happened after 95. The Mariners basically gutted some of their core players. And look what happened. We didn't get to the playoffs enough. And it's like this time around, it's like, dude, when you have a core like this, and there's only so many seasons that they're going to be here. And it's like, you're not going to trade Harry Ford because Cal Raleigh might not re-sign in 3 years. And it's like, well, you just drafted a catcher that hits for crazy power. It's like, what are we talking here? What are we talking about?
Well, maybe that's why, and we'll get into the draft part of maybe that's why they did draft that catcher. But things to say is, I've been saying it since 22 that this is a big opportunity for the Mariners to make something happen. And I got criticized when I made a video by saying that Mariners were not making legitimate moves in 23 when they really, really should have, especially when I thought that Teoscar Hernandez was not going to be enough. And I said it was going to hurt the bullpen. They were saying stuff like, oh, they have years of club control. They have time. It's too early to judge. And look where we are now. Mariners didn't really make any moves after Teoscar Hernandez. They sold away Paul Sewald. Yeah. And you have George Kirby and JP Crawford liking some random Mariner fan post saying that ownership is bad. And you have Cal Raleigh saying it publicly that ownership is a problem. Like, it's only been 2 years since I was already expressing my concerns. Like, yes, Mariners made the playoffs. That was like our little 95 little run, which didn't match 95, obviously. But the Mariners they're doing the same exact thing.
It did in some contexts that it breathed life into baseball in Seattle. You know what I mean? Because of the playoff drought and what 2022 did for the city of Seattle as a baseball community, it did kind of match that enthusiasm of what 95 did. The difference was that, you know, the 95 playoffs, obviously we got to the league championship series. But I'll say this: what is the difference between 2024 and 2022 at this deadline? Because we still had the three wild cards in 2022, right? What was the difference? Was it because that we were trying to break the playoff drought? So Jerry DiPoto went above and beyond to make sure that manifested itself. What's the difference? There, you know, apparently you found a dance partner for Luis Castillo. You know what I mean? You found the Reds. So what's the difference, right? What is the difference between 2022 at the deadline and 2024, where we have our first opportunity to win our first division in 20 some odd years, 23 years? What's the difference? To me, there's no difference at all. Like, the momentum and the enthusiasm from the front office has to be on that same level.
They got to do something.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to keep repeating it every single year. Like, I love this team. I'm not going to leave this team. And I've had thoughts of doing it, but I'm not going to. If anything, I actually was more excited about 2019 than I ever was in the Cano years and the Jack Z years and Bill Bavasi. And that's when the Mariners were tanking. But I don't want this to die and make this like a whole thing about, like, it's going to be so, like, if Mariners don't win a World Series or even make the playoffs again, the marketing team is going to find a way to say 2022 was 95 2.0, and they're going to try to overhype the crap out of it. They're going to make stupid documentaries about it. They're going to make stupid anniversaries about it. And I don't want that. I
think it's insane because history is repeating itself again. And we can, you know, I just think that if they miss the playoffs this year, and there's a very good possibility that could happen, a very good possibility, then that should be it. That should be it for this front office. It's like, dude, you've had fucking damn near a decade, and you've manifested only one playoff run. And as great as that is, you know, when you look at the everything that's in totality, and especially the last 4 years, where in 2021, with the Mariners in playoff contention, you're your answer to the clubhouse was trading away our best reliever to the Houston Astros.
Kendall
And then-
Graveman.
Yeah, and then I'll give DePoto his flowers for 2022. That was an amazing offseason. That was a good deadline. And the Mariners got across the finish line, but then they followed that up with not enough in the offseason. Your answer to additions after a playoff year is Teoscar Hernandez and Tommy La Stella, and who was the other guy?
AJ Pollock.
AJ Pollock, and there was the other guy,
Colton Wong.
Him too, and then there was the other AAA guy that got playing time.
Cooper Hummel.
Cooper Hummel, thank you. That was your answer. And then at the deadline, while the Mariners are still very much in a wild card position, your answer was trading away Paul Sewald. Like, that was your answer to it. You're waving the white flag mid-season, right? And it's like, this is, and then if this manifests again, where the Mariners, yes, it's very true that they have not been playing up to the back of their baseball card. They have been struggling, but even in the midst of struggling, they still banked a 10-game lead in the division, and they went into the All-Star break in first place. And if you do nothing and you wave the white flag, you should not be able to retain your job. Period. And maybe it's a coaching issue, and maybe DePoto stays, but Service goes. But that being said, it would be a massive failure. And this fan base collectively should be holding this franchise accountable, and we need a reset in the front office.
Which is absolutely necessary, because we still got the fan base of Seattle that will still go out of their way to say, you're not a true fan just for saying this. We're going to be just fine. You have to be positive. But how long have they been saying it?
By the way, talk about true fan, go fuck yourself. I've been around I've been watching this club since I was 6 years old, 1987. Okay, 1987. And I went through the early 90s. I remember when they hired Lou Piniella. I remember when they went on the run. I remember when A-Rod left, and I remember the early 2000s. I live and die by this team. I love this team, okay? And the reality is I've suffered more deaths than I have lived, because this team continuously breaks my heart. We haven't been in this position in a very long time, and because of whether or not they're hoarding their prospects, or they're looking towards later years, and you're completely ignoring the present. Meanwhile, you just had another successful draft, and it's like, what are we talking about? It's like, I understand that there's prospects in this organization that are sitting in the top 100, and it's like, dude, what is your priority? And that's
it. Really should be.
And it
win a World Series.
It breaks my heart. Yeah, it breaks my heart.
It really does. And maybe Mariners don't want to make the, quote, same mistakes they made by trading away Derek Lowe and Varitek for Heathcliff Slocum, but...
Yeah, but you know what, though?
It was the past.
But look at the intention when they did that, though. What did the Mariners desperately need? High leverage. They needed a high leverage reliever at the time. And Jason Varitek was blocked by Dan Wilson. Right? He was blocked by Dan Wilson.
And Derek Lowe just wasn't at that level, and the Mariners just didn't have time for it.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's like, yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020, and Derek Lowe ended up having a very good career with the Red Sox. But what did the Mariners need? And you know what? A lot of people gave Woody Woodward shit for that. But that being said, it's like he was concerned with the moment, and the moment was they needed it. And that's the thing is, a lot of old time Mariner fans give Woodward shit. But you know what, though? What you can't say that he wasn't committed to trying to get this team over the hump.
He really tried, and there was a point where it makes sense why he resigned after 99, because he was just done with it. He was tired of
it's that. He was tired of the fact that Nintendo ownership was not willing to put up to bring in, but also it was he and I've talked to Woody on a few occasions. Great guy. He did not want to be the guy that traded Ken Griffey Jr. He did not want that on him. And I understand. I get it.
I don't blame him. Maybe I'll make a video about him saying that he's possibly the most underrated general manager in Mariners history. the man who doesn't really
Yeah.
get enough credit for the 95 run. And he had a huge part of that. Like,
Yep.
I'm also planning to make a video on the best trade deadline in Mariners history, which was 95, when Woody Woodward went out to get Andy Bennis, Vince Coleman, signed Norm Charlton on the cheap, and it worked.
Yeah, but I mean,
but also you have to, if you want to talk about that mid-90s run, you also have to mention Dick Balderson, who was the GM from 86 to 88. And he was responsible for Edgar Martinez, Ken Griffey Jr., obviously. And some of the other, some of those other pieces, Omar Vizquel, some of those other pieces that he was able to draft. And of course, the Mariners developed, and they all came up. Woody was the guy that drafted Boone, was the guy that traded for Buhner, drafted A-Rod, obviously. But you get what I'm saying. It's like this is where we're at right now is something we haven't seen since those days.
Oh, yeah, of course. And let's hope that the Mariners don't repeat history, but they probably will. But I did read this website, and I think it's interesting. I don't know if it's 100% true, but it did give a very interesting trade scenario. So how the Mariners can get Vladimir Guerrero Jr., because that's the player I want the most, because I am just done with Ty France.
100%.
This was from Bleacher Report by Kerry Miller. He proposes a trade that would bring Toronto Blue Jays Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to Seattle, and the exchange would be Johnny Farmelo with a torn ACL. And this guy probably didn't even read the art, doesn't even read up on Johnny Farmelo.
No, I mean, well, hold on real quick. Johnny Farmelo can still be traded, but it's also the upside of Johnny Farmelo that is still, even with the ACL tear, he's still rated incredibly high. Go ahead, continue.
Johnny Farmelo, Felnine Celestine, and Ben Williamson. And when I saw that trade, I'm like, as much as I love Felnine Celestine, but with the shortstop depth that the Mariners have, I would do that trade. And honestly, I don't even think the Blue Jays would even say yes to that.
In a heartbeat, but that's the thing. It's not a return package that's going to get Toronto in the right direction. It would be like, if it were me, it would either be Ty France or Ty Locklear, because you're gonna have to give them a first baseman in return, because they're trading a first baseman. They're going to need one in return. And, they can either take Ty France and put him in Sky Dome, which I actually think that Ty France in Toronto would actually do wonders for him. Or you're going to take the upside of Ty Locklear, who's got 6 years of club control. They can reset that position. So if you're getting Vlad Jr. for a year and a half, it would be Ty Locklear, Felnine Celestine, and then probably Harry Ford.
That's probably more realistic. And yet
and then Ben Williamson also. So it would be a package of 4 very good prospects. You get the lottery ticket in Felnine Celestine, who, by the way, is still in the developmental league, for all those Mariner fans out there that love Felon and Celestine. It's like, yeah, like 2029, sure, but he's still in developmental leagues. He's still in like rookie ball. So the idea that you want to hoard him, it's like, dude, you still have Cold Emerson. Shut the fuck up, right? So it's like, that's the thing. It's like, you have to be realistic, and you have to understand that you're going to have to overpay some. And that is more realistic to get a guy like Vlad Jr., which I would be 100% on board if they traded those 4 guys. 100%.
Yeah, and I think 2029, I'm pretty sure 2029, by the time it gets to that, we may be fighting Skynet Terminators anyway, because that's when the war was ongoing. So let's not waste time, and let's make a trade before we have to fight robots anyway. So you only live once, right? So Mariners, please take the risk. Please make it happen.
What's funny is that
now, I don't know if you saw it, but the guys on Locked On Mariners had a trade proposal with the White Sox that was going to bring back Luis Robert and Michael Kopech. So the Mariners would get a very big piece in Robert, and also the bullpen help that they need. And I think it was like, a packet. And I think there was a third team involved. I think it was the Pirates, where the Mariners are sending 3 top prospects to Chicago. The Mariners are also, I think we're sending Emerson Hancock to the Pirates, and Laz Montez to the Pirates as well too. So the White Sox were going to ship prospects to Pittsburgh. We were going to ship prospects to Pittsburgh, and then we were shot prospects to the White Sox in a 3-team deal. That actually made a lot of sense. And yeah, we're losing Laz Montez, but that being said, he's still in high A. And you have to give up something of value in order to get something of value. And I when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. But that being said, it's a very bold deal. And yeah, to me, it made a tremendous amount of sense. But also, again, I get back to the B level players that seem most realistic, which are Jazz Chisholm. Makes a lot of sense for Seattle. He's a Jerry DiPoto guy. He can play multiple positions. He's a great locker room guy, great clubhouse guy, and a guy like Michael Conforto, who's from the area and wants to be in Seattle. He's still very much effective versus right-handers. And of course, you can still have that outfield platoon with Mitch Haniger or Dylan Moore. So that seems to be more realistic than not.
I like the Jazz Chisholm idea, because I think at the end of the day, that's probably going to be the most realistic move that the Mariners will make. And I think Jazz Chisholm is it would be the most Jerry DiPoto type kind of move that he would make. But who knows if he'll even do that?
I like the idea of Jazz Chisholm because it fixes the second base problem, which obviously has been a problem for quite some time. But also it allows you to deploy Jorge Polanco in different situations where he might be effective down the stretch. But ideally, what you want is a dance partner that will take on some of these contracts, be it Polanco or be it Haniger. Both of those guys are going to be free agents after next year anyways, and it does give payroll flexibility. But with that being said, we shall move on to the other bulk of the show. It's going to be about our beloved hero, Alex Rodriguez, and arguably we're probably the 2 biggest fans in the Mariners fan 100%.
base that
100%.
defend A-Rod. We still appreciate what he did in 94 to 2000, which you normally will not hear. I think it will be mainstream because Seattle Sports is the one that opened the opportunity for Mariner fans to actually have a perspective and be like, you know what? I would have taken $252 million. But A-Rod said some really solid points. The things I like that he said was, and you can have your take on it too. Yeah. I like that he said that he was honest about the whole fact that, you know what? I lived with a single mother. I had nothing. We were collecting food stamps. And when $252 million comes right at your face after going through all of that and carrying a Mariners team with arguably being underpaid because he was on club control and signed a pretty cheap contract, of course anyone's going to take it. He would have been a fool to take anything that the Mariners offered him, which the most popular one that we all know is the 5-year 95 with a team option after 2002. Stupid contract, by the way. The other thing I did like was how he still talks about Edgar Martinez and Lou Piniella, that those two are arguably the reason why his career took off. And without the likes of Edgar and Lou Piniella, the development and the breakout would have taken a little bit longer. And he also stresses that Julio should really focus on being the team. I think he said something that he doesn't, warning him not to be all about the fame. I don't know if he really said that, but I think he basically hinted that.
He alluded to it.
Yeah, he doesn't want Julio to be all about that flashy Instagram star, which he pretty much is. And A-Rod's like, hey, you really shouldn't do that. Take it from me, especially when Julio says that A-Rod was his favorite player, which he did admit to me when I met him with an autograph.
Sure.
And he did also say the strikeout thing is a huge problem for the Mariners, and he pointed out that Lou Piniella would hold a high level accountability on Alex Alex Rodriguez and the rest of the team, because he said if you hit below 240, you are going to Tacoma for at least a couple weeks just to work on your swing. Now, before we get into your point, the one thing I wish he did expand on, because he said everything that it's more like, what more do you want him to say? But the one thing I wanted to hear was like, what was his true side of the story with this whole thing with Scott Boras, how the Mariners handled it? That's the one thing I really wanted to hear. And there were conflicting reports by Peter Gammons of ESPN, formerly, I believe. He said that the Mariners were not serious enough about it. There was another report saying that A-Rod said that Seattle did not offer the 10 years. And he said that it was difficult to leave the team, but he said it wasn't difficult to being short-selled by the Mariners.
First and foremost, I love Alex Rodriguez, and to this day, he was the best draft pick in Mariners history. No disrespect to Ken Griffey Jr., 5-tool player, first ballot Hall of Famer, obviously, but athletically, A-Rod was our best draft pick. Now, that being aside, I know for a fact that A-Rod wanted to stay in Seattle because he had a good relationship with management, had a very good relationship with Lou Piniella, had a very good relationship with Edgar Martinez. And that was something that he actually wanted to stay. The problem with Alex Rodriguez was the fact that he also wanted to be the highest paid player in baseball. What's funny is back in the day, there was this conversation about who was better, A-Rod or Jeter. And the thing about it is like A-Rod, like talent for talent, was miles ahead of Derek Jeter. The only difference was Derek Jeter did what he did what he could to help win championships, and of course he did that. The Mariners did offer him a contract that would have been the highest paid player in baseball, except it was instead of a 10-year deal, it was an 8-year deal, which it's kind of funny, apples to apples. I mean, what's the difference between 8 and 10? You're still long term. The difference is the extra $25 million for the per season for the final 2 years of the deal. This is the hypocrisy when it comes to Mariner fans and A-Rod, but also the funny thing about when we have seen it here in Seattle where big time athletes get their extensions. When Russell Wilson got his extension, it was applauded. When Gary Payton got his extension, it was applauded. Nobody was calling him greedy for taking the money. I understand that Mariner fans were upset that he left, but the reality was, and this is the funniest thing, is like if you remember Nintendo ownership, they didn't even do that for Ken Griffey Jr. They didn't even offer to Randy Johnson, which is why Randy left, because he felt disrespected, and Randy would have stayed. Had the Mariners actually made an aggressive offer, he would have stayed. The Mariner ownership was never going to pony up the dough for A-Rod anyway. And they still made a pretty good offer that would have made him the highest paid player in baseball. But you have to understand the role of an agent. An agent is there. A good agent will be there to leverage one team against the other. And when A-Rod got that offer, how do you say no to $252 million? That's number one. How do you you don't? And yes, A-Rod will say that he came from nothing, which may or may not be true. But I am the type of guy who is 100% pro player. Like, you only have a finite amount of time in professional sports, and you have to maximize your earning potential as much as you possibly can before it's all over. And A-Rod was fortunate enough to get two long ass term contracts. He got the first one from Texas, and then he got his extension with the Yankees, which was another basically $10 million. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, listen, man, he did exactly what he was supposed to do as a player. Now, the other thing that I will say about A-Rod is he made a very good point when it comes to this offense, our current offense. I like the fact that he recognized that he recognized that the Mariners have the best pitching in baseball. Love it. But he was also saying something very critical about this team's offensive philosophy, which is their ability to hit with two strikes. And I think he mentioned the fact that there's a group of players in this lineup that are hitting like 150 or below with two strikes. And he was basically saying, like, listen, back in the day, if you were hitting below 200 with 2 strikes, Lou Piniella would take you into his office and say, hey, listen, man, you're hitting $150 with 2 strikes. We like, there was a premium on contact where it's like with 2 strikes, you're going to choke up on the bat and you're going to put the ball in play, regardless if it's a base hit or an out or whatever. With 2 strikes, your job is to put bat to ball, regardless of how you do it. And so he was like saying, yeah, with 2 strikes, coming up, it's like, listen, man, you got to choke up on the bat and you got to make a swing. Now, if you strike out, you strike out. But the reality is, with 2 strikes, your job is to put bat to ball. And he was saying like, with this offense, it seems like they're okay with strikeouts. And he was like, that's ass backwards. You should never be okay with conceding outs. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought A-Rod was 100% right in his analysis. And, and it's interesting. It's interesting that guys like A-Rod and smart fans will look at that and be like, yeah, 100%. Lastly, I'll just say that I think A-Rod should be welcomed back to Seattle. I think Mariner fans need to bury the hatchet because he was only doing what he was supposed to be doing. Now, whether you appreciated the fact that he lied about it a little bit, yeah, well, he was just doing what every athlete does when you're about to sign a major contract. You're not going to, you're not going to be 100%, forthright when it comes to your intentions. But that being said, I will say this, that A-Rod, number one, has a very good relationship with John Stanton. Number two, he's got a very good relationship with his front office. And I would probably assume that within the next 2 years, we're going to have an A-Rod night where he comes back. And I would like to think that he's going to be put in the Mariner Hall of Fame. And rightfully he should, because his number 3 deserves to be there. Because when you look at his 6 years in Seattle, like, he had some of the best years in the last 50 years of Major League Baseball. In Seattle, his 40-40 3 years in, his rookie season, which was unbelievable. He had a little bit of a sophomore slump in 97, but he still, he still
hit 300 with a 350 OBP.
It's like, and then of course his 98, which was the 40-40. And then
2000, a 10 wins above replacement, which he never did after that.
Yeah, so it's like, listen, man, the idea that he should be shunned because of steroid use, which is completely bullshit. The idea that he should be shunned because he took the money. It's like, dude, get over yourself. And oh, by the way, when you applaud, you're a hypocrite. When you applaud Russell Wilson signing that massive extension with the Seahawks, like, it's okay when he does it, but when A-Rod does it and leaves town, it's like, come on, man, get over yourself. You're a complete
What about
hypocrite.
the fact where Robinson Cano got suspended for PEDs, and where were Mariner fans then? All I heard was excuses like, "Oh no, there's no way he did that." And even Verlander, he made a tweet going, "The excuses are coming," and he was correct. And I knew he took steroids because I knew that 39 home runs when you're doing it off of T-Mobile Park, and 34, and his best season with the Yankees on home runs was 33 in a hitter's park. I found that very fishy.
By the way, I don't think that Cano was taking steroids to get a competitive advantage. If you remember, Cano was dealing with some injuries, and one of the it's the same reason why Fernando Tatis was popped, because of injuries. And steroids are basically our testosterone, and what they do is they pump blood through the body at a faster rate, which means that you heal a lot quicker than you normally would. And when you look at the age of Robinson Cano, to me that makes sense. But some people will say competitive advantage, but I think the competitive advantage is a byproduct of it, but not necessarily the main reason why he took him. But I digress.
Which is why I think Mark McGuire's steroid intentions was very misunderstood, because if anyone remembers, in 93 and 94, he suffered horrible injuries to the point that he said he was going to quit baseball. And then sometime between 94 and 95, I think something did happen, which may include steroid taking.
Yeah, sure.
And that was to get him back. But of course, it's heavily misunderstood because of his 98 season.
I also think it's the reason. I think that's the reason why Edgar Martinez bounced back from a potential career injury when he tore his hamstring off the bone. If you remember, in 1992, and I know this is taboo. This is just what I believe. That in '92 he was the American League batting champion. He had a phenomenal year in '92, and then '93 he had a horrific hamstring injury. Where those are the type of injuries that are very hard to come by because you never know how your legs are going to heal from that type of injury. And of course, Edgar Martinez never really was the same running wise, but he also looked a little bit bigger during the
bigger and hit some more power,
a little bit more power, but he still had the unbelievable consistency when it came to singles, doubles, whatever the case may be. I know that Mariner fans aren't going to like to hear that, but it's like you're talking to a dude that knows what he's looking at when it comes to physiques on steroids. You know what I mean? Like that's something I can just look at a dude and be like, I already know what you're taking. It's all good. Don't worry about it. I always thought
he was almost a twig.
Yeah, and you also have to remember that Edgar Martinez didn't really come up to the big leagues until he was like 27, 28. You know what I mean? And he was still like, as he was from 35 on, he was still performing at an incredibly high level. And also when you look at the end of his career, when did steroid testing really start happening? In 2003, they were taking random tests. And really it became very big in 2004. And if you look at the last couple of years of Edgar's career, 2003, 2004, those kind of numbers kind of dipped off a little bit. But he was still running strong all the way through 2002. So obviously we'll never know. He's a Hall of Famer, and I don't want to disrespect Edgar Martinez because Edgar is one of my favorite players of all time. But that being said, even if it came out that he was, I still don't look at him any differently. I'm just, it's just,
makes sense.
Could be another video idea of the future. Yep. And I think we touched on a lot of things about A-Rod that
I love A-Rod, man. I love A-Rod, and I hope he comes back, and I hope that I hope his number goes into the Mariner Hall of Fame. I don't think he should be like Edgar and Jr. and having his number retired per se, but inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame 100%.
Especially if you put in Dan Wilson, you 100% should put in A-Rod. I mean, no disrespect to Dan Wilson. We love Dan Wilson.
No, but you got Jay Buhner in the Mariner Hall of Fame, not necessarily for the totality of his career, but because he was beloved, right? And it's like, dude, A-Rod, and if you remember back in the 90s, A-Rod was easily as beloved as Junior in the 90s, and rightfully so. And I think he went on to have a very good career. I'm glad he won a ring with the Yankees. What's funny is I remember, I'm going to keep this really short, but if you remember when he signed with Texas, I remember thinking to myself, there's no way he's going to stay in Texas more than 5 years. Like he's going to end up somewhere else because consistently being in last place is not going to rub him right. And he's going to end up going somewhere. I thought it was either going to be the Yankees or the Dodgers. And I was hoping that it was going to be the Dodgers because the Yankees, it didn't fit, right? Because it's like there was so many stars already there. And it's like, how is A-Rod going to cope with the fact that he's never going to be loved like Jeter and he's going to be overshadowed by other stars there? It's like, does he have the ego or the capability to take a back burner? Credit to A-Rod. He did it. So
he did. And if you notice,
he should have went to Boston.
He's now nationally. He should have. Yeah. He is nationally loved. Like,
yep.
He's a great businessman. Let's not forget about that. Yep. Fantastic businessman, and great on the TV. Has a great personality, great charisma, and deep down, even when he was booed with Monopoly money, he said it in a press conference. Like, you know what? I don't blame them what they're doing. I do the same thing. I love them, and. You can feel it in his sayings with Brock and Salk that he really wished that the Mariner fans did not express so much hate. Like he didn't hate them or anything. He's just disappointed that people pretend that his contributions from 94 to 2000 was completely forgotten. And here's my last theory on A-Rod.
Go ahead.
I don't think Mariner fans hate A-Rod. I think they love him just in a very weird way because so many Mariners have left. Like when Mike Cameron left, no one said anything, and he wanted more money. When all those other players left, they didn't say anything. It was like non-news. But because of A-Rod's value and how much impact that he put, that's where all the emotions were so much packed in because they put so much love on him. And then when he quote broke their heart, that's where all the emotions are. So I think it's all emotional pettiness.
I'll take it a next step further. It was like, look at where we were after the 2000 season. We were one game away from the World Series. In hindsight, that's how close we were. And everybody understood that the very next year it was going to be, again, a playoff run. Now, we had no idea that it was going to be a 116 game season. But if A-Rod, that was the thing. It's like, dude, you're leaving right at the beginning of a window. And if A-Rod stayed, they still would have gotten Ichiro. That would have happened because Ichiro, his first contract wasn't expensive at all. Brett Boone came in on a 1-year deal. And if you have A-Rod,
Boone,
and Ichiro, 100% we get back to the playoffs. Now, do we beat the Yankees in 2001 with A-Rod? Who knows? But I for sure know that in 2002 and 2003, in the midst of a 90-win season, we easily would have gotten to the playoffs in those years as well, too, even if it was a wild card.
And they would have had to only get through, had they won the division, which they probably would have if you have A-Rod on that team, they would have had to get through just Minnesota and the Angels. And Lou Piniella had Mike Scioscia's numbers. And then you beat the Giants team, who is historically known for choking up until 2010. Yeah. So 2002 should have been the year.
I'll say this. Do the Angels win the division in 2002 with A-Rod in Seattle? Maybe, maybe not. But also in 2003, did the A's have that type of season in 2003? Maybe, maybe not. But the Mariners still are easily, either they win the division or they get the wild card. We were in, I think it was in 2002. I think we were 3 games off from a wild card. Like even with 93 wins, we were still just like a minuscule amount of games behind. And you don't think that A-Rod could have covered at least 4 wins throughout the season? It's like, come on, man.
He would have, and we can go on.
That's why I think Mariner fans hate him, because like he left right at the beginning of something unbelievably great. But that being said, also look at the fact that when Randy Johnson left, it was not on good terms. When Junior left, I'm not going to get into those reasons why Junior left, just because he's Junior and it's not appropriate. But he left also not in a positive way, and yet we're giving A-Rod shit for doing something that I argue was worse as Randy Johnson or Ken Griffey Jr.
I would argue before we get into this, because we can go on and on about A-Rod since we're diehard A-Rod fans. Like I'll even show you how much I love A-Rod.
Love A-Rod. Yeah,
I have an Alex Rodriguez action figure as a Mariner. But I'd like to argue that the way Griffey did it, he literally forced his way out of Seattle. A-Rod just happened to leave on an open market, but Griffey was like adamant on leaving Seattle. And even if they were a World Series contender, it still wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah, the Randy Johnson thing was even worse. So, he just left on the open market. But that being said, it's like, flick at the switches, right? He said anyone who blames A-Rod for taking $252 million at the time is just being salty. Who the fuck wouldn't? Exactly right. Like if you're at LA, if I'm a ball player and somebody offers me that kind of money to go play in Dallas in a state without any income tax, 100%, I'll see you.
And much cheaper houses, like what? Even $1 million can get you in Texas, even to this day. See ya. I mean, I've had thoughts of moving to Texas, but now we got.
I always thought. Yeah. Last thing, I always thought A-Rod would come back. You know what I mean? Because he liked it here in Seattle. He was very close to a lot of, the ownership and management. And I always thought that A-Rod would come back at some point towards the end. Like, what's funny is like, I just, in the back of my mind, I just said, you know what? A-Rod liked playing in Seattle. He liked being here. And now maybe there was some issues with his agent. But that being said, like, I always thought that maybe A-Rod would come back at the end as a
Mariner, just like Griffey.
Yeah. Like I'm sorry that it happened, but I'm here to help win, and But
there's a lot of what could have been, but it was also the bad timing that he got an insane contract with the Yankees, so that really didn't help.
That was never.
But we're gonna get into the draft, and we're gonna go over it briefly because we are running short on time. But why don't you give me your opinions on the draft? Because the only thing I really paid attention to was that the fact that the Mariners got a switch throwing pitcher. And I think deep down, I think they just looked at his upside. They didn't look at the fact that, oh, he's ambidextrous or whatever. I think at some point in his career, because usually when someone is drafted as a switch pitcher, usually management is going to take a look at him and say which arm he's more dominant in, and then they're going to go from there. Like, I don't expect him to be like switch pitcher for the rest of his life.
No. I know that Mariner fans wanted Trey Savage, who is kind of like what's his ass? Logan Gilbert clone. But that being said, it's like, yeah, I know. It seems kind of cool that, you have a switch pitcher. But that being said, his best side is on his right side, and the Mariners aren't going to waste a top pick and just to sit there and let him be a switch pitcher. I know that the Mariners publicly said, well, it's whatever he wants to do. It's like, no, because from his left side, I think his fastball tops out at 91, and his slider, he has a slider there, but it doesn't really, it's not a big league slider. The Mariners drafted him knowing that his value comes from the right side, because on the right side, his fastball is 95 to 98 and his slider is 91. So he's got very good pitches already. It's like some of his pitches are already major league ready. He's projected to me. I think he's like a 4 or like a top end 3 in a rotation, which is still very good for a number 1 pitcher. I think that he's, even fast tracked, he's still about 2 years away, 2.5 years away in that range. But to me, it was the second round pick where the Mariners went above, which was they're above their slot because I think they overslotted to get a guy like Ryan Sloan, who he touches. Ryan Sloan, he's a right-handed pitcher. He touches 100, but his fastball sits at 96. He's got a wipeout slider that's 81 to 84, and he's got to change that to 88 to 90 with hard downward action. And the Mariners have done this before, where they've drafted somebody and then used that over slot money to get them. They did that, as a matter of fact, in Dapota's first season when they drafted the first baseman, Evan White, and then they drafted, I can't remember, it was the pitcher with the over slot. And of course, that didn't necessarily work out, but it's a different Mariner organization right now. They're better at player development. And for your first 2 picks this year is telling, because you have a guy in Sloan who could be in the majors in 2 years, and they got Shenjay with the number 1 pick who could be here in 2.5 years. And then their 3rd round pick, I believe it was Hunter Cranton, who actually is pretty much ready. You can actually make the argument that he's ready this year, that he can be a high leverage guy, because his stuff is also major league ready as well too. And you can make an argument that he can see the Mariner bullpen this season, but definitely next year. To me, what the first 2 picks, what it says to me is that they're developing the next for their rotation to be ready in 2 years, because what happens in 2 years?
George Kirby and Logan Gilbert are up for renewals.
That's exactly right. And you still have club control with Bryce Miller and Brian Wu. And I believe that coming in 2 years is going to be the last year of Luis Castillo as well too. So they're already making preparations for the next cycle of Mariner starting pitching, and that's why they drafted the way that they drafted. So I love it in the context, and of course later this afternoon on my show I'll get into it a lot more. But for your first 3 picks to be 2 high-end, 2 starters that are going to be right in the mix, right in the middle of your rotation in 2 years, and then also to get a guy for the back end of your bullpen who I actually think like right now would be sitting in the top 5 of your prospect list, that could be in your bullpen next year. And then you get Brash back next year. It's I think it was a good job. You might say that, because they used their overslot money on their second round pick, that it left them in a position where they had to take chances later on the draft. But the totality of it, and especially with the guy that they also got, which was the catcher, Grant Knipp, 6th-round pick, two-way player, catcher, pitcher, and this dude just hits bombs. That catcher, like I think he was like in the top 5 when it came to slugging, but also exit velo in college. Like, dude, this dude's bat is just unbelievable. We're gonna find out whether or not that it's it does.
Josh Caron, is that his name? Josh Caron?
No, Grant Knipp.
Oh, Grant Knipp guy, because they also drafted another catcher.
Yeah. So I mean, I like the fact that they drafted catchers because obviously it means that you can trade Harry Ford if you need to. That's number one, but also number two, it just it also puts competition at that position in the minor league position, which is always good for. It's good for baseball.
Well, Jerry DePoto, I hope you heard that because you're seeing it yourself that Mariners have proven to do very well in the draft, at least as of now. Couldn't have been worse than Bill Bavasi, in my opinion, but you have the pieces to trade and you have the depth even after whoever in the world that you trade. So, Jerry, make it happen. John Stanton, open your dang checkbook.
Get off your fucking wallet. So also, before we go, I'm kind of curious, and I want your final thoughts on this, though. But as it comes to the deadline, who is your most want, but who are you willing to settle for?
My biggest want is going to be Vlad Guerrero Jr., big-time hitter. I know, and it's my biases is because of his name.
Sure.
But Vlad Guerrero Jr. is still going to be more impactful than what Ty France will ever dream of. But right. I think the most realistic, I would say it's going to be a player below a level of Jazz Chisholm. Like, I don't think Chisholm's going to happen, but they're going to make some kind of trade where the mainstream Mariner fans will be like, yay, they finally made a trade. But then it's going to be people like us going, yeah, we could have done a little bit better than that. I think that's the trade deadline that's going to happen.
Is there a name that you're willing to settle for?
Brent Rooker, I think, rings a bell, but the thing is, Oakland would ask for a ransom, and they know how to.
Maybe,
Brent Rooker is one. Whoever would be below Jazz Chisholm, Randy Arozarena.
I think he's above Jazz Chisholm.
He's above, probably. But yeah, basically, I don't think Roberts Jr. or Guerrero is going to happen, but I think ultimately it's going to be anyone like a Brent Rooker kind of caliber is going to be my prediction.
Yeah,
how about you?
And that's what you're willing to settle for, Brent Rooker.
With the level that this organization is, yes, but deep down, no.
I think that number one, that Jerry DePoto is holding his cards to his vest, and I don't think he would ever tip his hand in which way that he's leaning. He did say that he wants to do something dynamic. Now, the question is, what's dynamic to Jerry DePoto? I agree with you. I think my biggest want would be a guy like Vlad Jr. Like his dad, I think he's a very good bad ball hitter. So to me, that signals that he's more contact oriented, which is something that the Mariners desperately need. The question is whether or not they're going to do something that makes them uncomfortable, because in order to get him, you're going to have to do something that you hadn't done. That Castillo trade didn't hurt the Mariners because of what they gave up. Wasn't going to hurt the Mariners at all. And so there's going to be a way to do it. But I think that what I'm willing to settle for is if they made a deal that got Jazz Chisholm, Michael Conforto, and a guy like Andy Ibanez from the Tigers, who also improves the infield, plays multiple positions, I think he's very good against left-handed pitching contact-wise, which would definitely help this team. And of course, Conforto versus right-handed pitching is still very good. Good pull hitter to the left side with the short porch and right. And the thing about Jazz Chisholm is I like him because he again plays multiple positions, second base, and he can also play the outfield. So that definitely ticks a lot of boxes. And all of these guys are right around the WRC plus of like 100 to like between 100 110, which is what the Mariners definitely need. So I think that I would settle for that. I still think that if you only can get 2 bats and maybe improve your bullpen, that is also something that has to happen as well too. But I think that, and I'll say this before we sign off, that again, what I said this morning on Twitter was 100% right. If you do nothing, you get nothing. If you get nothing, you win nothing. And if you win nothing, you're fired. I don't think Jerry DiPoto, Scott Service, and Justin Hollander can afford to do nothing at this deadline. I don't think they can, and still be able to keep the fan base and still keep their credibility intact if they do nothing. That's why I think this is the biggest deadline in the course of the Seattle Mariners in the last 15 years. In the context of they're in first place, but also these guys don't have contracts for the next season. And imagine if they do nothing at the deadline and say, well, we couldn't find anyone, or, you know, we just thought that player wasn't worth our prospects. They're done. They're done. And John Stanton at that point has to come out and say, you're fired.
Get out of here. And like the first impression I got out of Justin Hollander was in that, and this is before we go, in that 2022 press conference after the season, when they were like reflecting, they asked a question to Justin Hollander. I think they were directing at him, and there was like a little bit of like 3 seconds of like nothing being said. And then Justin was looking at Jerry DiPoto, and Jerry DiPoto's like, are you going to answer that? That's the first impression I got of Hollander. Basically said that he's even more of a yes man than I've ever seen. Like, we haven't heard anything out of Justin Hollander. Jerry DiPoto basically got the president position, so he can have that. And Hollander, I guess he kissed enough ass to get the GM name, but deep down, Jerry DiPoto is still the guy.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's the guy that's running the ship. I'll just say this, that, you know, yeah, Justin Hollander is definitely yes man. So is Scott Service. Let's understand that there's a reason why they've been able to keep their jobs in the midst of mediocrity, right? Last time I checked, that sports, baseball, just like football, just like basketball, just like international football, it's results driven. Okay. And if you don't get results, what is the criteria of you keeping your job if the results aren't there? Like we gave this front office a pass for last season after the
didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either. But as a collective, Mariner fans gave them a pass because of 2022.
Shouldn't have gotten it.
Right.
Shouldn't have gotten it, because that was 2023 was our 96.
But for me, it's like, listen, man, I didn't give them a pass either, because I thought they were just too safe. And then we saw what happened this offseason. And what's funny is I thought that Mariner fans were giving DiPoto too much flowers for the fact that he's also, like, you don't think that Jerry DiPoto isn't a representation of ownership? Like, Jerry DiPoto knew well beforehand what his limitations were going to be in the offseason. And then, of course, the whole narrative became John Stanton's evil. And it's like, well, wait a second. Jerry DiPoto is the representation of ownership in the front office. It's like he knew well before we all found out that they weren't going to go and get Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani. It's like, yeah, it's like, it's like, dude, you cannot give them a pass. Like this, like what I want to see is what U.S. soccer fans did right after the Copa America, where the entire collective said Berhalter out, and they put pressure on the federation, and he was gone. Mariner fans, if they fail to do nothing at this deadline and they miss the playoffs, the entire Mariner fan collective has to say DiPoto out, and they have to bombard the Mariners with emails, tweets to the Mariner page, overload them, and just say, listen, we have had enough. This cannot continue. Period. And of course, yes, we can go. Yes, flick of the switch. Soccer. Yes, soccer. I love soccer. Get off my nuts.
Yeah, we can go on and on, but man, look at the time. And we did cover a lot. We talked about a little bit of the first half. We talked about Jerry. We talked about the draft. We talked about A-Rod, that we're making it clear that A-Rod, I'm going to say it. And if anyone wants to say I have a bad YouTube to unsubscribe, go ahead. A-Rod is the greatest Mariner of all time. I'm going to take it to the grave. I'm that guy.
I will say that he's the second greatest Mariner of all time. I think in the
of Ken Griffey Jr. and his longevity in Seattle, well over a decade. That's probably number one. But that being said, and of course Jr. came back. But that being said, A-Rod is like, if there's a 1A, then he's a 1B. And I'll say that he is the greatest shortstop in the history of this franchise. I think he's the greatest athlete that we've ever drafted in franchise history. And I also will finish up by saying that he needs to be inducted into the Mariner Hall of Fame. He should come back, throw out the first pitch, do a speech, because I think he said it perfectly in his interview on Brock and Salk, and he gave Mariner fans flowers and said they are one of the best fan bases in baseball, and that he loves them. It's time for Mariner fans, all those salty Mariner fans, to literally bury the hatchet. And I would love to see an A-Rod homecoming where he comes out with his number 3 jersey on, and they do a big A-Rod montage of his greatest moments in Seattle. And I would love to see the Mariner fans giving him a standing ovation. And mind you, a lot of these Mariner fans that hate him had never even watched him play in Seattle. You know what I mean? So I'll just say this: it's time, and A-Rod needs to be re-embraced. I mean, Randy Johnson came back when nobody thought he would ever come back to do a pregame, right? Like, even the Mariners extended Randy Johnson. You know what I mean? And it's like,
even though before we go, the Randy situation wasn't his fault. It was Chuck Armstrong being a complete prick about it.
Well, right, but that's the thing. You're right? But it also disrespected Randy Johnson to a point where, for a while there, he wanted nothing to do with the Mariner organization.
And he finally was able to.
But as time healed wounds, the Mariners brought him back, and they did. They Mariner fans obviously embraced Randy Johnson. He did the tip of the cap, and he was welcomed back to Seattle. And I think Seattle's a very forgiving fan base, and I think that it's time for A-Rod. It's time for A-Rod to come back to Seattle, and it's time for Mariner fans to appreciate the greatness that was when he was in a Mariner uniform. And I think it's time that the Mariners extend that invitation to the Mariner Hall of Fame, because he needs to be there. Period.
He does need to be there. Maybe we'll have another conversation about the Alex Rodriguez, but time has absolutely run out. Just wanted to say thank you very much for being part of the show. I hope we made your morning crappy commute to work to your 9 to 5 at least somewhat better, and make you forget about the bad traffic. But we got to head out. I got to get going, because hashtag don't quit your day job. And everyone have a good day, and go Mariners.
Yep. Absolutely, guys. And by the way, go Mariners. And this afternoon at 3:00, Swinging for the Fences, episode number 36.
36.